And we need to start now. And as it was very clear during the Glasgow Climate Summit as well, that there is a broad consensus on the urgency on the promotion of and the rapid upgradation and the developments on the effective decarbonization for renewable energy. As the volume of the renewable energy increase in the energy system, we need to develop more flexible and resilient energy system. Such as grid transmission infrastructure needs to be more robust, the digitalization balancing, and the other relevant solutions. So today's webinar is to discuss the emerging digitalization technologies in the renewable energy sector and their viability in the Indian context. So the agenda is spread to discuss some of the important questions and solutions around it. And we will start with the first presentation by Siddharth. He is from Solar Labs. Siddharth is a technology and a solar geek, and he has been building onto the different technologies for the solar industry. In his presentation today, he will discuss different digitalization technology and solutions and what the Solar Lab is doing, what are the different technologies that they have, and what are the possible business models around it for the implementation of the digitalization. Over to you, Siddharth.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Kajal. Thank you, WRI team, for inviting me to the webinar. I'm just gonna, if you could give me the sharing screen privileges.
Yes. Can you share your screen now?
Yeah, I can.
On the webinar panel? Yes, we can see the screen.
Yeah, so is it, can you see it in full screen now?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So I'll just talk about the solar space and the solar software space where I'm from. And like as we all know, since I guess somewhere around 2012, 2013, the Indian solar sector has taken off tremendously. And, we've seen unprecedented more than 50% growth over the better part of a decade, which obviously we have our ups and downs in policy and our trade wars with China and a bunch of other things, but the trend is usually up. So there's going to be more solar in the rooftop sector, in the utility sector, more next year and the year after that and the year after that, and that is undisputable. So ultimately, we started the Solar Labs back when I was in university at IT Mandi, and why we started was, we simply saw that, okay, solar is growing, and there were a lot of problems because when something grows really fast, it's difficult to, develop good processes, efficient processes, and so that, things can scale up fast. So, and this is what we saw. So in the solar space, there were, desktop software, which was expensive, it was time consuming, it was very complicated, and required a high amount of training. And, there's lots of data because you had to use like 3 or 4 softwares to do essentially like one solar system design. Because, you were using like PVSys for simulations, for calculating generation, 3D modeling in SketchUp, AutoCAD for drafting, and all of these are like industries, like horizontal software, right? So SketchUp is for architecture, AutoCAD is for creating CAD blueprints, and none of these are very effectively or well connected together. And the industry, since it was very small, the bigger guys or the bigger companies did not really cater to solar and creating solar software so that solar can be scaled up. So all of these tools existed, they could do the job, but the need was for an AI-based cloud platform which uses the latest technologies, especially which is easy to use, because when an industry grows fast, there's always a lack of trained manpower. So it has to be easy to use. The training time has to be lesser. It should be able to handle a high amount of leads, connect, help the installers drive solar better. And that's essentially what we started. And the space in solar software is very wide. There is the pre-install stage, which is around sales and design. Then there's the during installation stage, which is the commissioning stage, which can have various use cases like project management. And then obviously once the project is installed, how do we ensure that there's maximum amount of energy that's being generated, and the good deeds of that solar plant are actually spread out to other people. So it's a very wide industry, and I'll try to touch upon most of it. So like our vision was to help solar installers sell more solar and design more efficient systems faster. The reason is the customers like you and I, right, who are possible people who can get solar on our rooftops, like we want higher energy yields. We want to get to understand the proposal. We want to understand the financial merits, understand how it's going to look on our rooftop. And obviously it should be competitive on a tariff level. And there are a lot of problems also in the industry, right? So there's low quality, there's a lot of price cutting. People, like many installers, they're new. It's a new industry, so they don't really know what they're doing. Currently, this stuff is too expensive, and it makes solar uptake slower than what it can be without really tailored software to do a bunch of these things. So that's why we came in. We develop a solar, what we have is we have a solar system design software that helps an installer quickly create a sales proposal as well as engineering CAD blueprints, so that those could be used to both convert customers, prospects into customers through the attractive proposal, and also to figure out how exactly to design and install the system on the rooftop. So that's what we do. That was our first software. We have more than around 720 installers currently using our product today. And majorly we're in India, the US, a few Middle Eastern countries, and that's basically where we are. Overall, the solar space has seen a lot of activity. So one of our competitors, Aurora Solar, they raised more than $450 million in the US. And this is a software that helps in residential solar design. Also, there has been PVKs, which is for utility solar design, those really large ground-mounted plants. So they've raised $20 million. They've done a lot of work themselves. Enphase. Hello? Yes. Sorry, I think I lost power. Yeah. So Enphase Energy has had a very big and very strong digital strategy in the US, where they've acquired companies like Dimension India, which does design and permitting services based out of India and servicing customers in the US. They've acquired a solar design company called Solargraph, made some strategic investments into monitoring software, commissioning software, and that's basically a strategy that has helped them grow a lot. So software in the space does play a big part, and that's why we're seeing a lot of activity here, because it solves real problems. Some of the other use cases apart from design, I'll also touch on this, are things like large scale analysis. So I think many of us would have seen like Google's Project Sunroof, where you can see for any rooftop, you can pick any rooftop here, and then for that particular rooftop, you can see how much solar could be put up. So that's a very good way of an end customer just doing a quick proposal himself instead of having to talk to an EPC, and getting a general understanding of what solar is, what it can do for them, how much it can save money for them, and so on. So that's completely B2C. That's a very interesting use case that we've seen, and so you basically just select the roof and you get the entire generation data, 3D model, so on. So more stuff that we see happening in this space is managing the operations. So obviously the first part is getting the customers, and the second part is when you have these customers, you obviously have to install the systems, manage the relationships. And here we've seen that there are very custom solar CRMs really tailored to the solar flow. So there are some companies in this space who are doing some good work. And also in solar project management, which is to manage the construction process and making that efficient. So if you can build a system in 3 days instead of taking a commissioning time of 6 days, it's better for the company's margins, it's better for the customer who's getting the rooftop, and it's a win-win proposition. So there's a lot of stuff happening in this part of the software space as well. Again, some more things to help are AI-powered lead automated report sending. So, helping solar installers, because each installer has like 20,000, 30,000 leads. A decent installer will have that many. And it's obviously impossible to reach out to each of these every month, right? For the sales team. So building some more automation so that if you can share some comparisons of their bill with and without solar, so that the leads actually see that if they take the decision to go solar last month, they would have saved some money this month, right? So working on loss aversion and helping people understand what could be, helping the solar installers really reach out more effectively. And basically solar installers and EPCs are the heroes of the solar industry, right? They're the ones who are buying solar, they're the ones who are evangelizing solar to the world. And anyway, where we can support them is, I think, a win-win for the world. There's also some stuff happening in the monitoring space where you can provide consumers of rooftop solar, like mobile applications, so that they can monitor and understand how their solar PV system is doing. So whether it needs to be cleaned, are there any faults, and so on. And if they see this working, right? So if I have a system, I see this working, then I'll be more, I'll be more incentivized, and I'll be happier about sharing this technology with my friends, with my neighbors, and so on. So basically, this type of technology can help the owners of the rooftop systems become ambassadors and help generate referrals into the space. So that's my quick presentation. Happy to answer any questions or take it forward. So over to you, Kajal.
Thanks, Siddharth, for a detailed presentation. In fact, it was quite good to see how open and wide the space is in the solar sector, particularly for the digitalization to come in, and especially the AI technology can take up the space. There are a few questions coming up in the chat box in case if you want to answer them right away, or we can take them at the later stage also. Probably you want to just type into the chat box. And it's also interesting to see the wide range of applications and how the others can also participate in this. So there is one question that can you show me any case study of AI for solar project? I think you did mention about how Google and other residential and the large spaces we can utilize the technology. But do you have anything specific that you want to talk about?
Sure. I can talk about, let me share two case studies. So one is about, let's talk about optimization and solar design. So, if let's say, there's a 3D space and you have created, a 3D space in a software. After that, you have to see how you can generate or how you can put the maximum amount of solar PV into that space efficiently, so that it's a practical system. So you have to take care of where on the roof solar panels could be actually put, where they could not be put. So you have to be practical about it. So you have to identify and define the constraints. But once you have defined them, AI can help us figure out where exactly to place the panels, at what tilt, at what azimuth on different faces of the roof, and put up panels in the most in the most optimum way. Then after the placement of the panels, you can also optimize how stringing is done so that you can reduce the amount of heat losses that would ultimately be produced through the system. So you can simulate that, and AI can help us reduce those losses. If you reduce those losses, obviously there's more energy generation, right? So that's the goal.
Yeah, thanks. So there are a few more questions coming up, but because of the time constraint and we need to move to the next presentation, I'll request you to please answer them in the chat box and separately in the question and answer section as well.
Sure, absolutely, I'll do that.
Yeah, thanks. We'll move on to the next presentation. We have Mr. Vinod Tiwari from Power Ledger. Vinod is an energy expert with policy, commercial, and business development experience across the supply chain. His focus has largely been on the decarbonization and transformation of the energy market. And he has many years of experience of working in the energy sector globally. So today he will be presenting about peer-to-peer energy trading, what Indian market can learn from the global renewable energy market, and he will also be sharing few other case studies. So over to you, Mr. Vinod. Thank you.
Thank you, Kajal, and lovely to be here talking to WRI delegates. I'm joining you today from Brisbane, Australia. So good day from Australia. I'll share my screen and start the presentation. Just give me a second. All right, I trust you can see my screen now.
Yeah, it's just loading right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's up now. You can
All
see
right, so thank you. So the topic given to me is to talk about peer-to-peer energy trading and contextualize it to Indian context. What better time than now that we've actually been engaged with multiple stakeholders in India in peer-to-peer energy trading space. So yeah, lovely to be sharing our journey and experiences globally, but also talk about the specific context for India. So Power Ledger, just a brief introduction. We make software for decentralized and distributed energy markets. And we enable orderly integration of variable renewable energy on the grid. And we do it through a market-based solution that makes energy cheaper, cleaner, and energy systems more resilient. We've been going for over 5 years, headquartered in Perth, and have been pretty actively participating in this thought leadership as well as solution deployment landscape in the energy markets globally. We have presence in 12 countries where either we are currently doing projects or have just finished projects and continuing to expand. And of course, Australia is home base, but significant presence in Asia Pacific, Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand, Japan, India now, multiple projects. We're also in 4 countries in Europe, including Austria, where we're doing community energy projects, in France with green energy retailer, and also on East and West Coast of United States as well. And working with some of the global brands, be it renewable energy developers, utilities, and in some instances with government agencies directly as well. So through a whole range of our solutions, we are solving this problem of time and place with for 24/7 renewable energy. Most of you would understand already that the variable nature of the renewable energy offers its own challenges. And when you start to get above 20% on the grid, then you start to see these temporal grid problems like the duck curve and similar, when where you might have too much renewable when you're not able to use all of it, and when the renewable disappears, all the load reappears on the grid and poses the problem of peak demand. Also evident from this International Energy Association slide, in the last 3 years, 2019, 2021, more than $300 billion invested in renewable energy development. But as you'd see that it's almost directly correlated with investment in electricity networks as well. So what it means is as you add more variable renewable energy, constantly having to upgrade or augment the infrastructure, both at distribution and transmission level. So the end user is not able to see the cost benefit. Energy is getting cheaper, but overall electricity cost isn't. So we believe the grid's only as good as the markets that sit behind it. So what we do is we spin up these marketplaces using blockchain as the core technology, from provenance tracking of energy, real-time tracking of where the energy is produced and who is using it, to enabling local energy markets, peer-to-peer based local energy markets for sharing, trading that excess energy, if it exists, in a way that supports the grid flexibility services as well. So firstly, it reduces these local energy markets or peer-to-peer local energy markets, reduces because it uses up all the excess energy as soon as it is produced in the same neighborhood, same downstream to substation or feeder. It reduces the reverse flows and the requirement for higher order grid flexibility services, like for voltage imbalances or for reactive power management, etc. So we spin up these marketplaces and including for businesses and individuals where there is a requirement for 100% renewable or offsets for renewable energy certificates, for example, or a pathway of companies which are trying to achieve 100% renewable or 24/7 carbon-free energy. We enable these marketplaces for efficient buying and selling of renewable energy or carbon credits or renewable energy certificates. So who do we address? So it could be a large multinational with objectives around 100% renewable energy, or it could be a distribution systems operator or transmission systems utility, as in, and through a whole range of our solutions from management of PPAs to grid flexibility services to these local energy markets. And I'll talk a little bit more about these. These are all primarily driven out of peer-to-peer as the base solution matrix. And all of these are through these market-based mechanisms that are made available through Power Ledger platform. And what it's doing, it's addressing this new energy paradigm that is starting to emerge, depending on where you are in the geography. You would see various sort of level of this two-sided marketplace that are starting to appear. So the grid, as it used to be, primarily supplied by large generation to consumer, is now starting to look more hybrid, where you have businesses, residential customers with rooftop solar, energy storage is in the mix as well. So it is enabling almost or requiring new solutions, which technologies like ours make possible. Things like these peer-to-peer energy markets, different forms of peer-to-peer where solar can be swapped for goods and services. For example, excess energy from people's rooftop solar could be directed towards businesses' sustainability requirement or their renewable energy requirement. And in return, they may get store points, loyalty credits that they can use to procure goods and services down the track. Or carefully crafted local energy markets, again, peer-to-peer driven, where excess is used up as soon as it is generated by consumers who need it, and doing it in a way that supports or that reduces the grid flexibility requirements. But at the same time also, as I mentioned, creating these carbon credits or renewable energy certificate markets, all based on technologies like blockchain technology that enables more efficient and instantaneous mechanism for buying and selling. So if you look at traditional energy markets globally, there is sort of the layers, we've kind of structured them in 4 layers here, but typically layer 4, which is the wholesale electricity market, exists, and the consumers basically sit at level 1 here with their, this could be buildings or residential customers or commercial industrial with their rooftop solar, other distributed energy resources that might exist. And they tend to participate in these, or they usually participate globally, be it in US, Australia, through either VPP services or through aggregated services energy arbitrage or frequency control services, etc. But what we are enabling in this new dynamics or new paradigm that is emerging, these additional two layers, layer 2 and 3, which are driven out of peer-to-peer energy market to enable more easy and orderly scaling up of DERs on the grid. So, just to give you an example, in many parts of Australia, we have 30% plus penetration of rooftop solar. So some suburbs, even 50% or 50% plus houses have rooftop solar. So typically they will have so much of reverse flows on the grid that for orderly management of grid, they have to curtail that excess solar. So what these peer-to-peer markets are enabling is, before you curtail or you implement other punitive measures like charge to export, you can create these carefully designed peer-to-peer energy markets, some with rooftop solar customers, some with solar battery customers, even electric vehicles play a role, and other consumers who participate in this sharing, trading of energy at the local level. So peer-to-peer, becomes a key piece in reducing the need for curtailment. More orderly functioning of distribution networks. And where the distribution networks do require higher order flexibility services, that's also available through a market-based mechanism on these blockchain-enabled marketplaces. So I won't go into too much detail, but these could be, so peer-to-peer is a 24/7, 365-day marketplace. It exists. And automated bid and ask mechanism, where we also take into account forecasting and AI-based bid and ask mechanism. These could be forward-facing market, a day-ahead market. The regional markets could be week-ahead market, and also on the day when you do require flexibility, you can fill in with the intraday market as well. So and with a clear goal to support the entire stakeholder of energy system. So prosumers get better return on investment by participating in these peer-to-peer markets. Consumer get cheaper, cleaner energy. Energy retailers are able to take their margin because they are facilitating these trades, so they can charge a transaction fee. And the distribution network, the utility can charge, is the biggest beneficiary, because they get to manage their grid in a more efficient way, because these peer-to-peer markets are flattening the duck curve, which effectively means the distribution network can defer certain capital expenses and have a better orderly functioning of their grid. So literally all the stakeholders get benefited. Now these are, we use blockchain obviously for its huge advantage in this mechanism. It allows for uniform source of truth, time-stamped microtransactions can be done instantaneously, and the smart contracting nature of blockchain allows for better management of the entire marketplace. I'll quickly go through some of these case studies. We've been implementing this for over 4 years now. And I mentioned projects in India. So very first project that Power Ledger, along with our partners ISGF, and I see Reena Suri is also on the call. So together we implemented this project in UP, sanctioned by the UP Electricity Regulatory Commission. A sandbox was created for us to showcase how peer-to-peer can actually incentivize distributed generation or incentivize consumer to accelerate the deployment of distributed renewable generation in India. The project was done in Lucknow, was very successful, recorded by UPERC as a successful project that then led to inclusion of peer-to-peer in the last year's tariff order. So it is starting to become a reality that peer-to-peer in the state will be possible. We also, at the same time, in parallel, or straight afterwards, actually did this project with Tata Power DDL. Again, a significant milestone project that led to a detailed project report to DERC. And obviously, there are considerations for making some rule changes to implement peer-to-peer in the state of Delhi down the track as well. In the same way, we also did and almost validated the findings through a desktop trial with BSES Rajdhani. And that was for a project in the neighborhood communities in Dwarka region of, where there are lots of gated communities, how these could be implemented in gated communities behind the meter as well as across the grid. So this is not foreign to India, but I have to say that the real sort of iconic project in peer-to-peer energy trading space in Asia has been this project in Bangkok, which is called T77 Bangkok Precinct, that led to World Economic Forum advertising about this. And this is multiple commercial industrial buildings, some with rooftop solar, some pure as consumers, sharing trading energy, and also in the process seeing the benefits of cheaper energy, cleaner energy to all the participants. And when they're not using their rooftop solar energy, they were able to monetize by making it available to other communities. And not only in Asia, we've obviously got projects in the US, in Pennsylvania, with American Power Net. We've implemented peer-to-peer, actually at the headquarter building. I mentioned Solar Swap in my earlier introduction. We actually, working with Victoria Bidder, we implemented Solar Swap, where multiple rooftop houses with rooftop solar were able to sell their excess energy to Carlton United Brewery, and in exchange got beer. So it was almost like peer-to-peer project. But what it demonstrates is that value of you can change the currency of your excess energy and have a loyalty program where you could be part of a big brand's green branding image and get in return goods and services that could, and because they're paying in goods and services, they could pay you higher than simple sort of cost of energy that you would normally get through gross tariff or through feed-in tariffs. So multiple such projects in other regions as well. Malaysia did the national pilot, Sustainable Energy Development Authority with us. And that also resulted in a webinar and findings of how this could be down the track implemented in the country. We did a webinar with Sustainable Energy Development Authority and IRENA together to showcase the findings. This project in France with green energy retailer Equator takes this peer-to-peer to even step further, where we're adding a solution called Choose Your Energy Mix. So consumer is empowered to not only share trade, but also choose the type of renewable they want and the location that they want from. So almost creating that preferential energy trading mechanism along with peer-to-peer as part of this, this process. Equator is a green energy retailer, our partner company in France. So they are enabling this to their consumers. Someone in Paris can select tomorrow, I want 50% solar energy from that solar farm, or 20% wind energy from that wind farm, because that's what they want to support. So we enabling that level of granularity through our platform.
Sorry, Vinod, because of the time constraint, these case studies, especially like national to the global, how you moved, and they're really relevant and very useful. But can you just wrap up and
Yes, I have come to the end. This is another project was in Fremantle in Australia, which also demonstrated how renewables through our platform could actually be scaled up in an orderly way. So that's exactly the point where I wanted to stop. Thank you very much. I will stick around and answer questions and be part of the panel as well.
Yes, there are a lot of questions, in fact, coming up for you on the blockchain, and especially like the overall P2P mechanism, how is going to impact the market in India. So I'll request you to please check the chat box and the question and answer. And this presentation perfectly lays us onto the panel discussion, in fact. And this actually going to help us in overall understand how this PAI blockchain can help us in tracking and tracing the solar and the renewable energy, and from where the sources is coming, and how effectively we can utilize this space, because space is another one of the constraints. So thank you a lot for today's presentation. This was very insightful and helpful for us to now get into the panel discussion. So for our panels, once again, let me just put up the slide. Okay, so we have a astonishing set of panelists with us. We'll start with a brief introduction of the panelists, and then I'll hand it over to my colleague Deepak. So Arjun works as a manager with the RMI India team, and he's focused on decarbonization India's electricity sector. And before RMI, he has worked in the clean tech space, focusing on the deployment of off-grid electrification, commercial rooftop systems, and microgrid projects across North America, Philippines, and India. He was recognized as one of the top 30 under 30 sustainability leaders in Canada in 2019 for his work in clean tech sector. Welcome, Arjun Gupta. The next panelist we have is Reena Suri. She is the executive director with the ISGF since 2013. She brings over 21 years of experience in the energy sector with us today, and she has been contributing to various advisory services, white paper, and research reports. Some of the reports that she has written: the electrification of public transportation, blockchain for electrical utilities, energy storage roadmap for India, smart grid roadmap, etc. Welcome, Reena, and thank you for joining us today. We have already heard about Siddharth and Vinod, so I will not go over there. I'll go to Sugata. So Sugata is presently working as a head of operation in Tata Power Renewable Microgrid Limited. He leads the team. He has led the team of experts to commission renewable energy microgrids in Tata Power, and has commissioned 2 pilot microgrid projects in Bihar as well. So I'll welcome you all, and I'll hand it over to Deepak. Deepak is the Associate Director of WRI India Energy Program, and he leads the Clean Energy Initiative in India Energy. And he has been working with the CNI consumers and energy transition and water energy nexus work. Over to you, Deepak. Thank you.
Thanks, Kajol, and welcome to all the panelists. So really great presentations from Siddharth and Vinod. Just a minute. Okay, so basically I'll come to you. I'll come to you first, Reena. So what I wanted to start off by asking you is, ISGF has these various working groups, and at least from what I could quickly gather, working groups 1 to 3 have multiple elements of digitalization, which would be definitely relevant to what's happening with the grid and what's happening with the DISCOM. Could you please throw us some light on what discussions and future trends are emerging from the deliberations of these working groups, and how do you see the DISCOMs adopting some of these? What are some of the low-hanging fruits that can be picked, if I may use that term?
Thank you so much, Deepak, and I'd like to start by saying very good afternoon and good evening to all, and thank you so much, WRI, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this webinar. So ISGF has, I'll just take a couple of minutes to talk about ISGF. We are a not-for-profit organization, a PPP initiative of Ministry of Power, Government of India, and been closely working with the central ministries on renewable energy, urban development, heavy industries, state governments, utilities, regulators, etc. And with a mandate to advise the government on policies and programs for promotion of smart grids and e-mobility in India. We work with the national, international agencies in standards development, work to help the utilities, the regulators, and the industry in strategy development, technology selection, and building the capacity building of the sector by providing training and conducting training programs. So as you mentioned that, we have, as a member-based organization, we have a platform to bring all different stakeholders together. With the working groups, we have been working, very closely with the electricity distribution companies through the capacity that we have in India, to work with them to accelerate the adoption of innovative smart grid technologies, including the renewable energy, the electric vehicle integration with the electricity grid. And we have partnered with a large number of technology providers and entrepreneurs from around the world to introduce emerging technologies in India, as one of the projects which we have conducted with Power Ledger, Vinod just mentioned, to implement the peer-to-peer trading of renewable, the rooftop solar using the blockchain. So going back to how the utilities are emerging and adopting, digital technologies to better their processes, we have seen that the energy sector has been an early adopter of digital technologies. And since 1970, power utilities were the digital pioneers using emerging technologies. And currently, the electric utilities are on, a paradigm shift of digital transformation, with the advent of distributed renewable generation coming into play, electric vehicles, energy storage systems playing a key role, etc. It's a much needed move is towards a new era of digitalized systems. And considering the complexity of the overall operations, with this decentralization of the grid, the utilities need to adopt these technologies, undergo digital transformation to improve their business processes and operational efficiency. So also the growing concern of environment and government policies supporting decarbonization of the power sector, as well as the rapidly falling cost of the solar, wind system, the battery storage system, and digital technologies to control the distributed resources, are accelerating this complete transformation in the energy sector. In the aftermath of COVID, we have seen that the digital platforms have become the coveted assets of utilities in their business continuity and resiliency. And this movement towards digitalization is, totally irreversible, as we have seen. So moreover, the decentralization of the grid has also opened many new revenue opportunities also of the distribution utilities, and implementation of digital technologies will definitely play a key role in exploring these options. Many utilities and have started their digital transformation journeys, and from the discussions we've had with different stakeholders, with our working groups, that they have already planned focused implementation for IT/OT applications, and integrating to the existing system, and deployment of analytics solutions to explore options of data-driven decision making has already in play. So even though the Indian power sector, has evolved and has started using the digital technologies, it grapples with many challenges. And even though we are, being the fifth largest in the world, the grid that we are operating. So some of the challenges that we have seen that, there are poor operational efficiency, lower per employee productivity, higher cost of operation, AT&C losses, etc. But most of these challenges are leading, the discoms towards financial unviability. And I would like to highlight some of the areas, as you mentioned, which are the low-hanging fruits. So I would like to highlight some areas, some have been already highlighted by Siddharth and Vinod, where the discoms can benefit from digitalization to overcome these challenges. Digitalization, can facilitate the integration of the distributed energy resources and electric vehicles to achieve the emission reduction targets, the NDC targets. Also, it can optimize the asset operations with advanced analytics supported by AI, ML, which could lead to more granular estimation of demand to avoid excess generation capacities. The visibility of power flows in real time can be there to avoid overloading and excess capacities. And also, the costly system upgrades can be deferred with these implementation of digital technologies through efficient management of existing resources. And lastly, engaging the customers through digital platforms for innovative programs is also very important for the utilities, better management of the whole grid. And one more point I would like to highlight is that the utilities can balance demand and supply in real time through demand response, time of use, introducing the time of use tariff and other programs. So overall, it will increase the power system flexibility with the introduction of energy storage systems, microgrids, EV integration, and VPP with the digitalization that the utilities are looking up, towards. So talking about, I would just like to also add to that, the government and utilities, they are coming up with many schemes and have also worked in the past on, urban loss reduction schemes, which help to build the required IT infrastructure of the utilities, such as accelerated power development and reform program, APDRP. There was a restructured accelerated power development reforms program, RAPDRP, and with Saubhagya rural connections and network expansion focus scheme was launched. And in July 2021, there is a revamped distribution sector scheme which has been launched, and it is the latest of the many central government grant schemes which have been put together for electricity distribution network for investments with the objective of improving quality, reliability, and better affordability of power systems to the customers. So all these have played a significant role in digitalization for the utility operations and access and improving the performance of the utility. So some of the progressive utilities that have very good digitalization roadmap, which we can look up to, are maybe Southern California Edison in USA, Western Power Company in UK, UK Power Networks, etc. So for these, they have a clear-cut roadmap towards digitalization, which we can look up to. And for smoother transition of the digitalization of power sector in India, the utilities in India need to develop their own digitalization roadmap, which should be closely aligned to their business strategy, innovation strategy, digital strategy, and their IT strategy. And the key points that need to be considered for digitalization are a single source of truth. Like for all the data in the digitalized utility, all stakeholders should have the same data for all utility assets and operations. Their IT systems to be rationalized and modernized. Modern, robust, and secure telecommunication systems are required for going forward. And lastly, I would like to highlight that, for managing the evolving systems and new revenue stream that we are looking at, and, managing the digital technologies, it is extremely important for utilities to upskill the workforce. And we have been working very closely with the, bringing the experts from the domains and creating awareness, empowering the utilities with the domain knowledge, with different workshops, programs, and trainings that INCETF has been conducting. So I think that's about it, what I would like to contribute, that, achieving the desired goal of the digital transformation, power, and the utilities is a very challenging roadmap, and it is difficult to predict the future of the power and the utility sector in India. However, it majorly depends on how these technological advancements are being adopted, how the policymakers along with the power sector stakeholders work together, and they have a key role to play, and to drive towards the desired objectives of sustainable power for all. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reena, for those interesting points. And a couple of key takeaways that I had from this was one, about these new revenue opportunities. So possibly these technologies and well thought out, well integrated systems in tandem, along with these DISCOM revival packages, could fundamentally help in the financial revival of the utility. And you also preempted the skills question, and thank you for covering that also. I was going to come to you next with that question as well. So, but just one clarifying point on the skills and maybe even a digital mindset, as DNVGL quoted in one of its report, that skills and the digital mindset are a challenge among some of the larger utilities. So, is this skilling program structured and is the rollout planned in a scaled way, like how Surya Mitras was envisaged by MNRE and National Skill Development? So is it being thought of on that lines, or is it ad hoc in different utilities?
Yeah, so I mean, don't quote me on that, but I understand that the ministry is already committed, constituted a committee under one of the additional secretaries to put together a very holistic upskilling plan for the sector under the RDSS scheme. So that will be announced very soon, and they have a huge budget for capacity building under the program, which will be planned by the committee members together and will be rolled out in a very planned fashion.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Reena. I'll now move on to...
I would like to, take your leave because there's another meeting which has been preponed, so I have to move to that.
Sure.
And thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Take up your audience questions later. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you, Reena. Have a nice day. I'll now come to both you, Sugata and Vinod, about one interesting point and one question which even Jaimin has asked in the chat. So peer-to-peer transactions, as you said, give a lot of flexibility to consumers to trade access among themselves. And in fact, this was an option we had explored while working in an industrial park maybe 5-6 years back, where some of the consumers had very large roofs, some others had lot significant consumption, but the roof space was quite small. And when we thought about a peer-to-peer structure, at that time, obvious challenges came up where, who will set up that parallel network, who will set up these monitoring initiatives and all that. But even if, let's say, we were to do and Jaimin has rightly raised this question, wouldn't the DISCOM be worried about loss of, this excess, loss of this revenue from C&I consumers? So would request Sugata to maybe give a DISCOM's perspective first, and then maybe Vinod, if you want to add on to what Sugata said, or address this question which Jaimin and I have.
This is a very common question, Deepak, and in fact, I have been working with Tata Power Delhi Distribution Utility for last 15 years before I started heading the operation of the renewable microgrids in Tata Power. This is something usually people think that the DISCOM should be worried about losing the revenue. But actually for the DISCOM, the major issue is how to manage the demand and supply gap, particularly when the renewable energy is increasing in exponential scale. So basically in our country and in most of the countries, the DISCOM's revenue model is based on the return on the equity investment, not on the revenue per se. Revenue is actually determined by the tariff and it's a pass-on business model. So whatever is the energy consumption, if it is reducing through the renewable energy, we need to first see that whether it is actually reducing my peak demand, because in many of the countries, the afternoon peak demand is increasing. Because of the global warming, our afternoon peak demand is increasing. So if by that time, with the rooftop solar and in fact, Tata Power Delhi Distribution is one of the pioneer utility in the country who had promoted the rooftop solar for its customer, and who has also pursued with the regulatory commission to give a benefit in terms of the net metering, etc. So we have also, as Vinod has been mentioning, that we have also done the pilot of the peer-to-peer trading. But peer-to-peer trading, the biggest advantage is that the customer will be benefited. But that benefit will come on if we have a specific time-specific tariff for the customers during that period. And today, our country has not gone into that level of the regulatory regime also. When it will go, I think it will be very, very beneficial. For the DISCOM, the benefit will be in terms of the peak demand reduction, because that is one of the biggest challenge for many progressive utilities in the country. How do we reduce the peak demand? Because our network that we need to prepare, our entire structure is based on the peak demand. However, if the peak demand is for a very small period of the year, then it's not a good thing for the utility. It's not a good thing for the country also in terms of the asset utilization. So that's the main benefit of the P2P trading in my view.
Okay. Vinod, do you want to add on?
Yeah, I suppose I can just add here, and thank you very much, Mr. Mukherjee. It's always a pleasure to be there with the partners. You've already answered the question, but also there are revenue streams for DISCOM or utility or distribution network that is enabling it. They would typically charge a wheeling fee or a transaction fee to enable these peer-to-peer trades, and these are not separate market. Basically, they are integrated with the energy companies or DISCOM's billing system. So the same meter is going to read how many kilowatt hours were used. Now, out of 100 units that the meter reads, maybe 80 came directly from the grid, but 20 might be peer-to-peer trades. And if you're a prosumer, you might get a credit for that. If you're a consumer, you might get a line item that says debit for that amount. So it is integrated into the retailer or DISCOM billing system, which is what we've also trialed in both the projects that I mentioned. And yeah, there are other benefits. That is the better management of distribution network itself, because the rooftop solar is coming. They're part of the renewable energy mandate that the government set. For example, in India, there is a significant proportion that has to come from distributed renewable generation. So that's going to come from people's rooftop solar, or there will be a significant contributor to it. What peer-to-peer and local energy markets enable is an orderly mechanism, so that the system doesn't go out of control. You don't have to reinvent the wheel and look at what I mentioned in some of the Australian case studies or Californian case studies. So you can do it a carefully crafted local energy market driven by peer-to-peer energy trading. That will actually be a real benefit because it will absolutely defer capital expenses and operating expenses on day-to-day management. It will reduce reverse flows, harmonics, and the negatives that come with these deployments, and also the higher order flexibility services that the distribution networks typically require when there is too much rooftop solar. Things like voltage imbalances or reactive power management. It's quite often they have to actually secure reactive power or create these standing contracts for flexibility services. So there is budget now in majority of, let's say, in Australian distribution network companies to deal with the flexibility. So that budget can be reduced by carefully creating these peer-to-peer markets. So it's a solution. It's not a problem. It is absolutely a solution for what we say is orderly integration of renewable on the grid.
Absolutely.
Thanks. And just if I may just add on, even maybe the orderly integration, if there is need to levy a fee, maybe levy a small fee, but keep it consistent for a longer duration. That would be a way to go forward, right?
Deepak, just I would also like to point out here that actually today we are facing a much bigger problem apart from the peer-to-peer trading. That today actually our energy sector is responsible for the lion's share of the greenhouse gas emission. 65% of the total GHG emission is coming from the energy sector. Whereas 759 million people are still under the lack of energy access service. So that mostly that is in Africa and Asia, but in some other countries as well. Here, the problem is that closing the energy access gap is very, very critical for the entire global population. While we also have the target that we need to halve at least the energy sector emission by 2030. So doing both the things together, there is only one solution, which is the renewable energy, because that is the perhaps the best solution by which we can increase the energy access at an affordable price. At the same time, we can also reduce the greenhouse gas emission. But renewable energy is the biggest challenge is in terms of the integration with the main power grid. And there the digitalization will be the main answer for this issue. There we need to focus that how do we integrate the renewable energy to the main power grid, and how digitization can help there. Here, the smart grid, I think it would be good that Reena could continue here in the ISTF problem. Because being a part of Tata Power, which is the largest integrated power utility, we have presence in every area of the power sector in terms of generation, distribution, and the renewable sector. We have even 15,000 rooftop customers for Tata Power Solar. At the same time, we have a huge number of distribution sector. We understand both the challenges. But their smart grid technology and focusing on the digitization for the power sector through AI or machine learning, where I can address the issue of the variability and the uncertainty of the renewable energy. That is the main thing that perhaps the entire power sector need to focus right now. That's, in my view, this should be the issue that we should discuss more.
Sure. And I think, thank you for that, Mukherjee. And I think it's a perfect segue to request Arjun to talk about RMI's report with Niti Aayog, where some of these issues have been addressed. And in addition to that, if you can also help us understand what are some of the learnings from maybe a few countries abroad that we should be looking to implement here, it would be great.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Deepak. And it's been a really big honor to listen to both Vinod and Sugata on their overall opinions about digitalization. Quick 1 minute intro on RMI India. We are Think and Do Tank and mission-driven organization to decarbonize the power sector and the mobility sector. And for that, we work with a lot of state and central nodal agencies across the country in hand-holding them with regards to policy, so that we can accelerate towards decarbonizing, these key energy sectors that we're talking about. Now, talking about the Niti report and also linking it to digitalization, we are essentially now moving from a fossil fuel-driven grid to a renewable energy-driven grid, which means that now other generators like coal, hydro, and the others will have to synchronize their operations with renewables, which is a massive overhaul. At the same time, the power procurement practices itself are moving from traditional PPAs to more market-driven approaches, and that's something the central government is heavily pushing towards. So what we're going to see is there's a huge amount of interventions required across generation, transmission, and distribution. And obviously, there are larger interventions like storage, integration, coal flexing, and whatnot, which will play a large role. But digitalization obviously is a key element. And now talking about the report and our own experience so far, what we are seeing is that state discoms essentially have two large challenges with regards to power procurement. One is the short-term power procurement challenges, and another longer-term challenges. So for RE-rich grids, especially, what we're seeing is that renewable energy forecasting is definitely a key pain point, because overall renewables are intermittent. Now, they have intermittency on a daily basis, they have intermittency on a seasonal basis. So as you see more and more renewable integration, the overall intermittency will also change, because of which your power procurement practices, power procurement costs also fluctuate significantly. And on the longer term, what is happening is that because there's such a big overhaul, like I just mentioned, overall on the generation side, DISCOMs also want to have a long-term power plan right now, which can act as a Bible for them, saying that by 2030, this is how much renewable should be added, this is how much coal should be phased down, for example. When do we start looking at integrating storage? So these are the two larger sort of focus points for us that we mentioned in the report as well. And that's something we mentioned in we are seeing with states and helping them also to find how do we resolve these situations. So essentially, the way that we are looking at solving these problems are that looking at, like you mentioned, lessons from countries outside. Australia, for example, has one of the highest penetration of renewables right now. What we are seeing right now is that there are these incredibly good RE forecasting solutions over there that take into account multiple weather forecasting models to give them accurate enough forecasts to help them manage their power procurement portfolio very well. On the long-term planning, what we're seeing is that utilities across the globe have a capacity expansion model, understand long-term plans, and really integrate it as a part of their planning and decision-making portfolios. So we are working with those solution providers and marrying them with DISCOMs in India to identify how do we bring in those best practices and help these DISCOMs improve their digitalization uptake.
Okay. Thanks for that. One other point which I came across while researching for today's discussion was this IEA's report on digitalization, where they have spoken about the importance of the digital devices' own consumption. So it's large number of devices, sensors, and other kinds of devices which are coming in, which would facilitate this digitalization. What about their own energy consumption? Is that something which will assume worrying trends as we go forward? One, as an example, people have already spoken about the energy consumption of blockchain mining process, and is there similar concerns across the spectrum, across the number of devices, or is that something which you believe is under control?
So I think if you look at it, the larger umbrella is called distributed resources. So in that you have all these devices, like you mentioned, you obviously have electric vehicles as well, which is a very big sort of revolution coming across, which will impact the grid on the distribution side. So on that aspect, what we are seeing is that the lower hanging fruits for digitalization is the demand response side of things, where essentially you can control or minimize the overall peak demand situations if you can integrate a good demand response program within DISCOMs, again, globally proven, and it's something that DISCOMs in India are also interested in, because instead of having massive capacity expansion to meet the peak load, which happens, in a few times a year, why don't we look at, integrating demand response to just help out in those peak periods of time, helps out reduce peak power procurement costs for DISCOMs, and also helps minimize the T&D upgrade costs. So those are my sort of inputs on those items that you asked.
Sure. Thanks for that. Siddharth, coming to you as an entrepreneur in this space, and I know I'm putting the burden of all kinds of digitalization and technology entrepreneurs to you when I pose this question. What have been some of the challenges that you have faced, while trying to make your solution acceptable and possibly even leading on to a sale to DISCOMs, and what are some of those challenges, if you can elaborate on them?
Sure. So I'll talk about the government segment and also the B2B segment. So mainly as a company, we have relied on the directly going B2B sales. So we work directly with solar installers and solar EPC companies, developers who in turn use our technology, and then they would provide services to to end customers, right, or to the government itself. Our projects with the government have been few and far in between. So we mainly work through consultancies, so like EY or PwC, where we had some work that we sort of jointly had a pitch, or we worked with one of the use cases in a larger project, and that's how we work with the government. So obviously we have tried to get into the B2G's sales and that segment directly as well. But that's something that, as a young company ourselves, and possibly, the strengths that we have, we've not been able to crack that. So that's something maybe I can learn from Vinod and the rest of the people on the panel on how to do that. On the B2B side, right? Like obviously, when you take a new technology out into the market, you have to prove that the technology works, right? Second, as a young company, you have to prove that it's not going to just disappear 6 months down the line, or you always have solvency questions, right? So it's definitely challenging to wade through it, but I think it's a matter of just having those early believers and then building up on your customer base. So for us. Like the first year we clocked around 50, so that was in 2019. So we at launch we clocked about 50 customers, and then the second year we brought on around 300 users onto our platform. So it's just about building from what you have, giving those references, and in some cases proving your financial model and your cash reserves a few times, especially with larger enterprises, and then making it forward. So for example, like Mr. Sugata is also here from Tata Power. So Tata has been one of our our biggest customers, and our software is used by around 400 of the Tata Power channel partners of solar rooftop in India. And so we had someone there who really believed in us, who gave us a chance, and then from that we built on, and we grew. So that's the way it works.
So champions in discoms and regulators really do help to push the technology.
Yeah.
So just keeping track of time, I think we are, as per the agenda, at the end of the moderated session. Now I'll just request my colleague Kajol to see if there are questions which she can pass it on to you.
Thanks, Deepak. Yeah, there are a few questions that have come up in the chat box and also in the Q&A section. There are a few questions coming from Vinod, especially onto the digitalization and the centralized blockchain, and how these mechanisms can work for different segments, and what is the technology that you're using. So if you can answer some of that questions, that would be great.
Yes. So I'm just reading, I think there's a question.
I'll pick one of these questions and possibly address it to Mr. Sugata Mukherjee. So Vidisha has asked, what kind of interventions can be made by discoms in India if they implement virtual power plants, and what kind of collaborations with the technology companies do you foresee?
Sorry, I could not hear the last part. You were talking about the virtual power plant. That is the question. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. So it's about what kind of interventions can be made by discoms to implement virtual power plants, and what kind of collaborations with IT and software companies are needed for that.
Right. So basically, there has been some initiatives taken in Delhi by Tata Power Delhi Distribution and with the help of the regulator, like in terms of the net metering, Delhi net metering policy. If you go there, there will be some a concept of the virtual net metering, through which we can also have the solar plant which are used. Suppose in the virtual net metering, the concept is the solar plant which can be installed, suppose in a farm land, can also be used by the consumer who is using this for his own commercial establishment in some other area. So that kind of facilitation is required not by the DISCOM, but with the DISCOM support by the regulatory authority. Today, our country has seen some progressive regulation in terms of the virtual power plant or in terms of the other aspect in renewable energy, but they are very few. They are only the pockets of excellence. That perhaps needs to be replicated and on a government, because the DISCOM needs this direction from the regulatory authority. Today, DISCOMs are operate in the regulated department. At the same time, DISCOMs should also focus on digitalization, prepare for this idea, and also pursue with all the stakeholders, customers, as well as we are working in Tata Power Delhi Distribution Limited, like Siddharth has mentioned, like Mr. Vinod has mentioned also. We promote the new technology, and at the same time, we would see that it must benefit all the stakeholders. DISCOMs today can also be benefited by virtual power plant. DISCOMs today can be benefited hugely in terms of the new technology, which can facilitate rooftop solar like P2P, which can also facilitate in terms of the integration of the renewable energy in any other mode. So there, the new technology today in our country, very honestly, the R&D investment is very, very less compared to the other countries, as we all know about that. But technology, promotion of the new technology, it depends upon the utility, how the utilities are going to promote the new technology, which can support these initiatives. So there, the DISCOMs can definitely take a leading role.
Thank you. And Vidisha, I hope that answered your question. But now drawing upon one point which you raised, Mr. Mukherjee, about the DISCOMs playing a central role in opening up these markets, and maybe other panelists could also add on to what Mr. Mukherjee says. But with smart meters and all that, at the time there was heavy regulatory scrutiny given the amount of capex that was going to be involved. Do you see similar kind of scrutiny with the type of digitalization that is going to come up, especially with rooftop solar, etc.? And a related question is, let's say a situation like electric vehicles and vehicle to grid integration, who needs to take the lead in opening up these markets? I know you mentioned that DISCOMs play a primary role, but can the regulator anticipate something? Is there a scope for creating regulatory sandboxes where we, try out, see how these functions before mainstreaming? So,
I can share our experience in Tata Power, what philosophy we follow, and basically in terms of the new technology, like in Tata Power, we have created a Innovation Incubation Center in association with the Department of Science and Technology. What we intend to do is that it will be scrutinized. Whatever expenses the DISCOM has to incur for the new technology, it will be very critically scrutinized. We scrutinize ourselves on that. Ultimately, it has to be scrutinized by the regulator also. So we have to scrutinize the expenses, and there has to be a clear cost-benefit analysis of any new technology that we are incurring. Benefit has to be measured properly so that benefit is more than the cost, and that is the reason actually what we do. At the same time, we also are very much open to piloting new technologies where we can do the proper testing of the proof of concept of the new technology, so that DISCOM can understand that this is how the new technology is coming. This is how peer-to-peer trading is going on. Now, when we have done the peer-to-peer pilot, our objective is simple. We need to show the benefit of peer-to-peer trading to DISCOMs in terms of the peak reduction, to customer in terms of their value addition if any tariff change is done, And those has to be showcased to the regulator so that regulator has a enabling environment where they can go for the supporting regulation for this. Okay, so that's the way I think we should progress, and in our country, the DISCOM should take that role, that we should do that feasibility check, and has to be very scrutiny has to be done, because most of our distribution utilities are government operated, and even for the private distribution utilities also, since we are operating in a regulated environment, every expense that DISCOM incurs is ultimately going to be paid by the tariff by the common people. So has to be the investment has to be properly checked, that whether this is a judicious investment or not in terms of the technology. It has to be done. But that should not deter anybody for testing the new technology, which is going to give the value, and the benefit is more than the cost. In that case, only we use the technology. Otherwise, even if no entrepreneur will also go for any technology where the benefit is less than the cost. They will not do that, isn't it? So for all the stakeholders, the proper scrutiny needs to be done. At the same time, we should do the testing in such a manner that we can implement it in large scale. Our objective is that ultimately it has to be implemented in large scale. Policy regulator will definitely support. And I can assure you, with my experience of more than 20 years in power sector, the regulator will never refuse anything which is logical and which is going to give a benefit to all the stakeholders. They will not refuse to do that.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Just wanted to see if Vinod, Siddharth, or Arjun, you want to add on to anything that Mr. Mukherjee mentioned.
No, I think Mr. Mukherjee really covered it really well. I'll just probably add one more thing, that it's our experience that in many instances, it's also the regulators who are enabler of these sandboxes as well. So they create the environment. So utilities, DISCOMs can take the lead and try out these new technologies as well. So, I mean, the case in Uttar Pradesh, the whole project was created under a sandbox approved by UPERC, and that set the guidelines for trialing peer-to-peer. And regulator was keeping a close eye on all the steps basically, and then obviously when the detailed project report and customer experiences were shared, it led to progressing to the tariff order and beyond. So I think that's a really good practice, and literally around the world, many countries do that, creating that sandbox environment to enable the pioneering technology trials. So yeah, someone has to take that lead. But of course, we have the really forward-thinking utilities like Tata Power, the utility of the future, which take they craft their own roadmap and take on the new technologies directly. So it's a combination of both these things, where policymakers, regulators, and forward thinkers, thought leaders in this space really take the conversation forward. There are a few questions actually around peer-to-peer we haven't had a chance to really address. I might very quickly, some of them are actually about when you have too much of rooftop solar, isn't that contraindicative because it might actually add reverse flows to the grid, and what will it do to the substation infrastructure, for example? And I think a very valid question, because what it will do if nothing is done, then it'll require augmentation of the infrastructure, which will increase capital expenses, which in turn then sort of increases the overall cost stack for all the users. But if it is done in a we're talking about orderly implementation, so creating these local energy markets where not only rooftop solar, but integration with other DERs like battery energy storage, create this environment where excess energy is used up and shared and traded within the distribution network, downstream to feeder, downstream to substation, then it actually is a solution. It reduces the in fact, the need for deferment or provides a deferment to capital expenses. So, I think in that question, there is also the answer is already embedded there as well. And yeah, some other models were actually, some of the questions were around utilities losing out money, or their long-term PPAs might be affected. It is of course, someone will be a loser. So eventually it will be more renewable at the distributed level. They'll start to become a solution, because if you see around the world what's happening, including in Europe, the energy crisis, those who are able to deal with energy locally are actually the most better off. So that is clearly a solution to have energy in your local network, and integration of that energy such that it is sort of doesn't affect the performance of the distribution network. So energy communities are clear solutions, going forward, and we'll start to see more and more of them globally. So I think I'll probably pause. We're almost coming up to time, and hand it back to you, Deepak.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think we are almost at the end of our stipulated time. I just wanted to hand it back to Kajol and Ahona to see if there are any last questions.
Thanks, Deepak. There are still a few questions that are pending for the from the participants, and Siddharth, I request you if you can just type in those answers, the very specific questions on how do you compare it against the drone technology for the rooftop assessment, and how the shadow analysis can be done. And there are a few more questions very much related to the peer-to-peer trading, and how more we can do around it. So I'll request you all to please check the chat box and the question and answer, because of the time constraint, we won't be able to take all of those questions. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. It was a pleasure having our panelists here, and also participants for posing such interesting questions. And there was a very delightful discussion that we had around the blockchain, the AI utilization, and the digitalization in the overall RE. And this is the way that we look forward, that how overall we can accelerate and scale up the RE technology, as we have a very big target around the renewable energy. So thank you once again. The recording will be available for the webinar on the social media page. Request you all to please check the social media page, and stay tuned in case if you have any more queries regarding the digitalization in the RE. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.